Welcome back viewers, ladies, gentlemen, non-binaries and anyone with ears or other sound detection organs. Hope you enjoy. We are continuing with Going Native, written by Uncle Sealing. Going Native, Chapter 79. Well, I told Jelsai, if she doesn't kill the bitch I will. Jessica nodded, as much to herself as to Merrin and Ieng. Aha! How is Eskel doing? Ieng's voice was soft, lacking the bright fullness that normally accompanied it, and Merrin took a moment to squeeze him tighter. Since Stace's arrest and subsequent disappearance, Ieng had been a mess. The last 2 days had spun Ieng into a depression and Ellora into bouts of impotent rage. Merrin had thought she would resent it more, how broken up Ieng was over his boyfriend, but that wasn't the case. He was obviously hurting, and Merrin only felt the need to comfort and protect her husband. And punish those responsible, of course. She fully expected there to be a fight over who got to be first in line to kick the shit out of that militia bitch. He's fine. 20 or so minutes in the sauna and he perked right up. I thought I was going to die of heat stroke, though. Jessica leaned forward, as if she was telling a secret. There wasn't anyone else around in the rec room, but she still lowered her voice in a stage whisper. He's curled up on a beanbag chair under a heat lamp with potato and one of those awful vintage sci-fi novels Stace likes. It's super adorable. I bet it is. Merrin and Ieng both laughed, though Ieng's giggle died almost immediately. Jessica seemed to notice and her own smile slowly died. Merrin decided it was time for some damage control and a change of subject for everyone's sake. Do we need to do anything for Ieng's parents coming back? Need any help getting things together for them? It was Jessica's job to take care of the guests, but they were Ieng and Merrin's family. Least she could do was offer. No, I've got it all taken care of. They didn't really move out, so I just have to air out their rooms. Jessica smiled. I never thought managing a hotel would be so easy. Turns out without any guests most of the problems just sort of vanish. Don't worry, Ieng said quietly. I'm sure it will pick up. Yeah. I still have no idea what kind of accommodations. Shit, what was his name? Spreads the word through Noble Service will need. I'm a bit squeaked about the thought of setting up a surgery here at the hotel. Jessica thought about it for a moment. It does offer some possibilities, though. Oh? What do you mean? Merrin tried to sound as interested as she could to help draw Ieng into the conversation. He'll probably need a lot of the stuff in the medical wing. It's a bit early, but maybe Eskel wouldn't mind moving in with me temporarily. Let our new guest use Eskel's apartment. Jessica grinned. It would give us a chance to spend more time together. Ieng burst into tears. Jelsai was cool and collected as she followed the clerk deeper inside the precinct. At least, that's how it appeared on the outside. Years of noble intrigue and investigator caution had honed Jelsai's professional mask into a nearly impenetrable barrier when she needed it to be. It was taking almost all of her effort now. She was barely able to focus on the yamming idiot's words. Used to have something called the right of silence or whatever, basically meant that a perp didn't have to give a statement or aid in the investigation. Makes it a pain in the ass, so for big cases like this we like to give them, stiffs especially, a couple days to cool off before we interrogate them. Cool off how? Nothing serious, just a couple days in a cell to think about the mess they are in. It really helps. And why wasn't Ster Eustace Grant in your records system? It had taken Jelsai 2 full days to find Stace. Despite being picked up, there wasn't an arrest record on file anywhere she could find. Thanks to that unbelievable bitch's actions towards Eskel, they weren't able to follow in the shuttle, and with the rain the landing cameras didn't get a good view of the registration on the cruiser. They did manage to get a clear video of the officer throwing pom at Eskel, for what it was worth. She called various stations and just got the runaround. In the end, Jelsai sent an official interior communique to every militia precinct in the Greater Provo/Salt Lake City area with a picture of Stace explaining that he was wanted for questioning in connection with a death involving a noble and needed to be found immediately. Jelsai justified it to herself that it was mostly true. She was definitely a noble, and if she didn't find Stace soon people were going to die. Well. The clerk sounded a little guilty and let out a cough. If they are in the system, it's harder for us to justify holding them. If we drag our feet on the paperwork a little bit, the perp can have more time to themselves. Jelsai had to stop and stare when she saw Stace in the cell. He was sitting on the floor in nothing but a pair of boxer shorts, back against the wall. His prosthetic leg was missing, and judging by the way the blankets and pad on the nearby cot were in disarray, he had tried to pull himself up but hadn't been able to manage. His skin was red and splotchy, one human eye bloodshot. It took the man a moment to notice that someone was there, and once he did it seemed to take far too long to recognize who she was. "Hey, Jel." The moment the clerk had the door unlocked, Jelsai pushed through and slid onto her knees, leaning over Stace. He was definitely feverish. "What's wrong?" She tried to fight down panic. "Not much. Just dying, I think." He raised his right hand shakily and showed it to her. The hand was wrapped in a bandage, dirty and crusted a dark brown where it met the side of his hand. Jelsai grabbed at Stace's almost painfully hot skin and started peeling away the gauze. She knew some first aid, maybe she could help. It took some tugging to get the bandage clear from where it was stuck to the wound. It was a fight bite, a fairly common injury and hard to keep clean because of the naturally high bacteria content of your opponent's mouth. Only her rage kept the nausea at bay as she examined the clearly infected wound. Angry red lines were moving away from it and up Stace's arm. Definitely treatable, but it would have been a hell of a lot more treatable 2 days earlier. At least with proper Shilvati medicine he wasn't likely to lose the hand. "It's bad." His voice was too calm, still a little out of it but becoming more focused as they continued to interact. Like he was slowly waking up. "Why didn't you tell anyone? You're the first person I've seen since I got here. Figured I would starve until the infection got going." "Welp. That did it." Jelsai grabbed Stace and started pulling him up. Without his leg he wouldn't be able to walk, but perhaps she could carry him on her back. You can't. If you tell me I can't take this man to the hospital, I will shoot you in the face." She flexed her right wrist carefully. Just a touch more pressure and the new hold-out pistol up her sleeve would drop into her hand. "I am not joking." "The hospital." The clerk seemed to notice Stace's condition then. "What happened?" "Infection and neglect thanks to you dumb cunts. Now help me move him or get the fuck out of my way." To the clerk's credit, she helped. As Jelsai carried Stace, she considered her options. She wasn't the sort of person who made political plays and abused her station. Even if she was the sort, she wasn't any good at it. The people, the unbelievable rotten cunts, who did this to her man had to pay, however, and the likelihood of that actually happening legally was pretty low. The militia would obfuscate exactly what had happened to protect their own and legal proceedings would drag on. Recordings would get lost and who to blame would become more and more ephemeral. No, this needed to be approached differently. Jelsai was more of a knife in the dark, what she needed was an orbital strike. She would have to call her sister-in-law. Toril Chelza, first wife of honoured son Jemsai Chelza, took her job very seriously. She helped manage all of Jemsai's business interests and often served as a bit of a public face. Jemsai was far too likely to be dismissed out of hand for being a male and, when they couldn't avoid it, Toril would play the part of the woman in charge. It worked well. Toril also enjoyed her relationship with Jelsai. They had always gotten along well, both possessing a no-nonsense nature that led to the sort of friendly ribbing seen among close siblings. She was probably closer to Jelsai than any other woman on or near this planet, and Toril had enjoyed seeing the positive effect Stace had on her sister-in-law. When she received news of what had happened to him, she immediately got to work. Lunch that day was at a high-end restaurant providing gourmet human food in Denver. Her dining companions were the second daughter of a merchant house that was doing well off of Earth exports and a marine captain who, while noble-born, had decided to avoid going for the obvious interior route. Both of them had friends who were at the bar where Stace had stopped a mass shooting. By the time Toril left the restaurant, 2 hours later, she knew the deed was done. She had slipped Stace's condition into the conversation naturally, let them ask questions and tease the full story out of her. Toril was, of course, clearly upset by the poor treatment of the human hero. When they pressed for details, she began to lay out her carefully curated nuggets of truth. Poor Eustace had been taking some time to himself, finally healed from his ordeal, and ended up being attacked by a gang of anti-Shield terrorists out to get him because of the shootout at the bar. He had managed to hurt one and, after the rest of them ran off, he called for medics and valiantly tried to keep his own attacker alive. Once the militia arrived, of course, things went bad. They took him and then he had just vanished. Toril watched abject horror fill the faces across the table as she explained how it took 2 days for Jelsai to find her man, and by then their abuses had almost killed him. She didn't say what those abuses were, but she sure as hell implied a whole lot. Before she let go of her audience's emotions, she gave them 2 more kicks. Eustace had spent his 30th birthday, his first real holiday since he was lost in the wilderness, locked in a jail cell. His celebration was to lay on a dirty floor, since he was missing a leg and couldn't even get back up onto the cot. Tossed aside like a used tissue. And finally, the last dagger into the back of the militia women who had wronged Toril's family. While Eustace was in his cell, somebody was losing his effects. His prosthetic leg was missing, but it got even worse. Eustace Grant was a widower, and someone had stolen his wedding rings. A human tradition, the last memento of a spouse long dead. 4 hours later, Toril met with a cute boy in San Francisco for drinks. He was one of the aides for Provincial Governor Swasiro, and this time Toril didn't have to say anything. The boy, who she was pretty sure had a crush on Keller and was hoping to meet the giant of a marine through Toril, started talking almost immediately, giving her the latest gossip. "Did you hear about that Eustace guy? The one who stopped that shooting?" He stopped to blush prettily. "I mean, of course you know who I'm talking about. He's going to be your brother-in-law soon." "I know him, yes. Why, did you want me to pass something along?" "No, did you hear what happened to him? It's awful." Toril hid her grin under a carefully placed expression of concern. Her dinner guest, with horror and sympathy in his face, explained how Eustace had been attacked by terrorists and then, when the militia was supposed to help, they had apparently kidnapped him to be kept as some sort of sex slave. If Agent Chelser hadn't managed to find him and storm in with Keller and a group of Death's Head commandos, her fiancé would likely have been shipped off-world. At least, that was the rumor. Provincial Governor Swasiro was in a fury about the whole situation. So far they had fielded dozens of upset calls from nobles who could not stand the thought of their savior being so abused. They wanted blood, and they were going to get it one way or another. The woman who had arrested Eustace was already in custody. They were looking at charging her with kidnapping and attempted murder for leaving him in a cell with no food, water, or medical care. Additional charges of assault and animal cruelty were likely coming after a video started circulating of her throwing a dog in a young Helcom boy's face. That was assuming the woman survived long enough to go to trial. Some of the noble families who wanted a piece of her were not the sort that followed the letter and rule of the law. As a favor, the young man gave Toril some additional advice. Wasiro was going to come down hard on regional governess Elenki over the whole situation. It was starting to look like the corruption of the militia under her control was systemic, not localized to that one precinct. Hundreds of complaints by humans had just sort of gotten lost. All Elenki cared about was keeping her crime figures down, and to the deep with doing it properly. Things were about to get very bad for the regional governess, and House Chelsea should definitely do what they could to keep their heads down. Toril invited the young man out for dinner in a week or so, apologizing to him that she would have to divide her attention between him and Keller, since Toril owed her co-wife a fancy dinner and had to combine it with the date. The boy practically vibrated in excitement as he accepted. Stace carefully tapped the fingers of his right hand together. Thumb to pointer, thumb to middle, thumb to, they still hadn't managed to find the rings. Stace couldn't help the sinking feeling in his gut. Daniel's wedding ring, and his, were gone. He resumed tapping his fingers together, trying to keep a rhythm. "Mr. Grant? You're stalling again?" The voice pulled Stace out of his reverie and he looked across his living room to his therapist. "I told you to call me Stace. And I told you to call me Catherine. As long as I'm still Dr. Richards to you, you're Mr. Grant." Dr. Richards leaned forward, focusing intently on Stace, and he felt his cheeks heat up. "But you're still stalling." "You're right. It's just," Stace sighed. "Every time I think I'm getting a little ahead, some massive shitstorm comes to wash away all my progress. Another piece of me gets lost." He held up his hand to display it, showing off the patch of white. The skin graft wouldn't show once he had a little son, but for now he had a pale square wrapping from the middle of his palm to the middle of the back of his hand. Most of his smallest finger was also white. Even when the skin was blended in, he'd know. Sylvester Morris's poor oral hygiene had nearly done him in. Stace lowered his head, eyes starting to well with tears. "I wish I never left the mountain. Everything's ruined. I even lost Daniel's wedding ring. His car is trashed from the rain and nobody will work on it because they are afraid of their shop getting firebombed. All I have left of my husband is a photo album of painful memories and a dildo he bought me as a gag gift. I think about that, and then I realize that I feel more upset about it than I do about the 4 people I've killed in the last month. Which just makes me feel even worse." Dr. Richards gave him a few moments to collect himself before she replied. "Do you really regret leaving the mountain?" Stace closed his eyes, took a few deep breaths. "I don't really think so. It's hard dealing with loss. You put off grieving for a long time, and coupled with all of your other stresses it's understandable that you'd feel so overwhelmed." Dr. Richards leaned forward, a few strands of grey hair coming loose in front of her worn face as she took Stace's hand. "Remember that you have people who care about you. Friends who love you and will help. I just wish this was over. All of it." "Stace." His head raised up at the sound of his nickname. "Are you considering harming yourself?" His first instinct was to dismiss the question, but Dr. Richards' Catherine's clear worry stopped him. Instead he took the time to consider his feelings, turn the idea over in his head. "No. Not really. Sometimes I wish I died when he did. It hurts to say that, Stace took a moment to wipe his face, blow his nose on a tissue. "I feel guilty thinking that way. I know how much it would hurt Iing and Ellora if I was gone, and this new job of mine is more important than any of this. But I can't help it. There's nothing wrong with the way you feel. It's part of the process. There aren't any shortcuts." Catherine released Stace's hand and picked up a small notebook, jotting down a few things. "I know we discussed it before, but how would you feel about medication? There are a lot of options, and I think it would help." "Okay." Stace nodded. "I'll give it a try." Can you talk to Eskel about it? He knows my medical stuff better than I do. Of course. I also want you to discuss your feelings with Iing and Ellera. They are important people in your life and they need to know how you feel. They can help. All right. Thank you, Doc. Catherine? She took a moment to lean forward again, putting her hands on his shoulders. You just try to take it easy, okay? I'll see you next week. Good luck with your meeting. Thanks. End of chapter. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss any episode and do all the other YouTube stuff. Visit and support the author, and I'll see you next time. If you didn't enjoy, comment on what I can do better. And as usual, have a wonderful day.